I should also mention that when I talk about murdered and missing Indigenous women, what I mean is murdered and missing Indigenous women and people. Historically, Native acceptance of genderqueer people is unmatched in America today, where they're considered outside of the norm. And while we've made significant improvement today in the treatment and acknowledgement of transgendered people, it's still not enough. And so I think it's important when we talk about murdered and missing Indigenous women to also acknowledge that genderqueer people are also a target and erased in culture today. And so I want to make sure that we include that in our conversations.
Right. Yeah. There's been more visibility, I think, being gained by sort of the I don't know if it's an actual movement, but I'm going to call it like the Two-Spirit movement, as just a way of including multiple people with different gender expressions, some of whom we might be able to identify as like trans, according to sort of the dominant culture's definition of that. But then there's so much more diversity within the Two-Spirit like umbrella, I guess. Mm-hmm. I think it's wonderful, because if we are dealing with gender as more or less a spectrum, which is how I tend to look at it, you can be anywhere along there. Sometimes one day you can be more in this direction, and the next day maybe more in that direction. And I think it's all fair. I think it's all awesome. I think it could be in like my ideal, like utopian, like super hippie version of like a decolonized future. Like we just all are what we are, and we identify however we identify, and it's not a big deal, and people are just celebrated for who they are. And I see a lot of the potential for that in
absolutely. And all of our roles are around our aptitude rather than like how big our boobs are. Yeah.
All boobs are beautiful.
I actually have been following the Two-Spirit movement very closely because I have a genderqueer child who chooses to not be defined by male or female, but just goes by whatever they feel like on whatever day that they feel like doing it. And I fully support that.
That's so cool. I mean, we could definitely do an entire episode on like gender expression and queerness, and how all of that works. But I want to say like real quick that I know a lot of people have a lot of difficulty around pronouns, especially for, folks like your child who, may feel like their pronouns vary from time to time. And I know a lot of people are like, well, it's just really hard to remember to call you they instead of he or she or whatever, and making it about themselves and how hard it is for them. But I don't understand why it's so hard, because like, if you know somebody whose name is Richard and they prefer to go by Rick, you don't call them Dickie. Like you call them Rick because that's what they prefer to be called, and it makes them comfortable. So like if we can do that for nicknames and, variations on people's names, I don't understand what is so hard about respecting people's pronouns. Like it does take a little bit of reprogramming of like grammar rules if you've been taught that they only, applies to plural instead of singular.
Just grammar rules are colonial anyway. I can say that the more you do it, the easier it gets. And so just do it. Like, damn. Like, what?
Just figure it out. It isn't that hard. And if you screw up, then you just apologize to the person and move on. It really is like,
exactly.
I have occasionally screwed up at like when I've been drinking or something and like done the whole like, oh God, mea culpa, like, oh, I called you by the wrong pronouns. I'm the worst person ever. I'm trying so hard. And oh my God, I think it's been a really long time, at least, since I've had the kind of like self-loathing that I do after one of those incidents, because like me screwing up and calling you the wrong thing is not about me. It's about me trying to respect you and doing the best that I can. It's a respect thing. So that's just, I don't know, quick little lesson for anybody out there who has trouble with pronouns, like just do your best, make it about the other person and their comfort and your respect for them. Like it's not so.
I've gotten to the point where I'm just like, I'm sorry, they, them. Anyway, moving on. You know, it doesn't have to be a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody really like needs to hear your whole like song and dance about how sorry you are every time.
Yeah.
It gets I'm sure it gets very old for people who hear it a lot.
Yeah.
Well, so we've talked a lot about the pre-colonial concepts of femininity and how those have changed since colonization. And so now here we find ourselves in the modern world, in the new millennium, the 21st.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of upset, like even just like in the past few years about femininity, like in the culture and what it looks like. Because there's been the Me Too movement, which has led to a lot of people blatantly identifying as feminists and then really like just deconstructing what feminism means now, how it can be different across different groups and intersectionality. Like there's been a lot of exploration of femininity in our culture.
You could see it in the media today where like in the 1990s, 1980s, even the mid 20th century, where you have like these really feminine women, and then you have like the outsider, not like other girls girl, who's kind of breaking down like these feminine tropes. But the thing about that person, the thing about that character, and the reason why those characters are so popular is because more people identify with those characters than they do with the feminine person, because more people kind of fall in other places on the spectrum than like way over on like the most feminine end.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and like that's just a numbers game. Like it makes sense, and yet we are shown repeatedly these versions of like the utmost extreme of femininity, and you know, we're not necessarily explicitly instructed to behave like, say, who's an ultra feminine, Sleeping Beauty, because I love that movie. And I think that like honestly one of the parts of Sleeping Beauty, the movie, that I like the least is actually Briar Rose. She is like kind of the ultimate Disney princess feminine character. She can talk to the animals. She sings so sweetly. She always wears a dress. You know, she's super slim and sprightly and graceful. She has all of the feminine traits that we have been taught are feminine. And like, you know, nobody in my growing up experience ever like pushed me up against a wall and said, you have to act like Briar Rose.
Well, not specifically, but I do feel like we are told what to do, and I'm gonna argue with you on this one. When we're told to act like a lady.
Oh yes, that's a good one. And that's kind of the thing. Like, it's rare that we're explicitly told, like, okay, do these 5 things, and you will be performing femininity correctly. But when you constantly see those same 5 things exhibited in the heroine character or in advertising or whatever, and then you layer that with act like a lady, it amounts to the explicit laying out of the rules.
Right. But the rules, like you said, are not really like actually defined. It's like dress up, but not too much. Like don't dress down. Wear makeup, but don't wear too much makeup.
Have big boobs, but not too big boobs.
Smile, but don't like smile too big.
Oh, you know? Yeah. You know who is coming to mind recent, like for me, I think she's been in the media a lot recently. But I also was watching like a Pee Wee Herman special where she was on. I don't know why recently.
Pee Wee Herman special.
I love Pee Wee Herman, and we could have a whole episode on Pee Wee Herman and masculinity. That would be but
that sounds good.
Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
I feel like in a lot of ways Dolly Parton is kind of like the American like uber female.
Yeah. So one of the things for I love Dolly Parton.
Oh,
For
God,
one, I think she's self-made. She is just awesome. And she's what comes to mind when women say they, quote, have it all.
oh,
She has, she's famous.
yeah.
She dresses the way that she wants to dress. She does the things that she wants to do.
She's successful as hell.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's like she learned the rules and then broke them, like just enough.
Yeah. So I was raised by a mother who I think really in her way is very strongly feminist, and like the older she gets, the more feminist she gets. But her personal gender performance and decisions were very much based around motherhood and housekeeping, and that's where she feels comfortable and what she wants to do. So she's an interesting person for me to examine. I swear I'm not going to go on forever about my mother, but like she's very feminine in a lot of ways, but never really particularly presented as feminine, like has always had short hair my entire life, was always very into sports, things that aren't typically super feminine. And she also did not enforce hyper-femininity on me or my sisters. But at the same time, we did get a lot of like, act like a lady. And I remember specifically my mother having a problem with Dolly Parton when I was a kid, before I really knew who she was, because we didn't really listen to like country music, so she was just kind of a general celebrity that I was vaguely aware of. But my mom had a problem with the fact that she had big fake boobs, that she dyed her hair, that she wore too much makeup, and it was kind of confusing for me because I'm like, but she's doing all the things that make you like the correct woman, right?
Yeah, like her house. When I went to Hawaii, I had to go look at her house. It was like a pink mansion. It was like painted pink. The walls on the outside are pink.
Oh my God. That's so
it's almost like she like took the rules and like blew them up.
Yeah. Yeah, and she has talked about that. I've seen like video of her talking about how like she based most of her look on the town sex worker when she was like she looked at that woman and was like, that's what I want to look like. She's awesome.
Yeah. She's beautiful.
And I think that is amazing, number one, because the a sex worker can be a role model. Surprise, that is a real thing. And I feel like Dolly kind of did look at like the uber feminine characters and be like, okay, I'm gonna do that, but more. I'm gonna do it harder and better. And it's almost like doing drag.
Like her femininity became her power. She took the concept that was supposed to like keep us in these pretty little cages, and she flipped it to give herself power.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is like men feel entitled to women. And so a woman who doesn't follow these rules are generally cast out of society. If you look at women who have done things like this historically, we have like them literally cast out of society and seen as witches or monsters or temptresses. And or when a man does something, it's strategic, but when a woman does something, it's calculated. And while a man is allowed to react, a woman can only overreact.
Right.
And so when we're looking at Dolly Parton, some people would say that like the way that she looks is calculated so that she would get seen more and that she would get more famous, rather than strategic, like as if like a man who was exhibiting hypermasculinity, John Wayne.
We pick on John Wayne a lot.
Did the same thing.
So that makes me think of like a few things. What you said about like women reacting is overreacting made me think about like one thing that I've been thinking about a lot as we've been coming up to recording this is how, although there are rules about what is feminine and what is not feminine, the actual like shape of what femininity is in the dominant culture right now is very vague. It's very nebulous. Like the tomboy as a celebrated
Mhm.
archetype.